The gentleman on the left is Attorney General Thurbert Baker. Thurbert's a good personal friend of mine. As Al said, I practiced law in Georgia, and at the time I was practicing law, Thurbert and I were insurance defense lawyers who worked at different firms. He's a great guy. He's a Democrat. He's still a great guy. The governor is Sonny Perdue. Sonny is a Republican. Sonny is a diehard, doesn't like Democrat Republican. So there's this brief moment in 2003 when Sonny came in and they're shaking hands and everybody's happy. And as happens with the AGs, sometimes we split on issues based on kind of our principles or our political views. And one of the most famous recent ones is health care. Some of us chose to challenge it. Some of you didn't choose to challenge it. And in some states, you have a governor who's one party and a AG who's of the other party, and there's a natural tension. I will tell you, it's not half as bad as the tension between AG of the same party and governor of the same party when your boss decides to endorse the other guy against the sitting governor. Nonetheless, Thurbert decided that he didn't see the legal merit in our challenge. And I think that's well within his bounds, and ultimately Justice Roberts agreed with him. Nonetheless, the Republicans in the Georgia House introduced a resolution to impeach Thurbert when he refused to carry out the governor's demand that he join our lawsuit. And I bring this up because in the political world, we all have our national associations, and there's a National Governors Association, and they're basically impotent. They can't do anything because there's a Republican Governors Association and a Democratic Governors Association, and those folks are the ones who drive the policy. We as attorney generals are different. We have NAG, and NAG helps us collectively drive our policy. How many of you do consumer, antitrust, Medicaid fraud? How many of you have been in a multi-state? You've all experienced how we work together regardless of parties. And that's one of the things that makes the Attorney General so effective, and it's one of the reasons this civility amongst each other is so important to us, because we get along. Now, we have the political wings, but we've managed to fight to keep the political wings doing only political, which is raise money, the necessary evil of politics, but to keep them out of the policy. Now, they don't like that because it's easier for them to raise money if they can get involved in the policy, but we fought long and hard not to do that. Now, what has happened is, I know, I get tired of looking at me. What happens is we have a policy, at least a tenuous policy, that the Republicans will not challenge an incumbent Democrat Attorney General, and likewise the Democratic Attorney Generals will not actively support and challenge an incumbent Republican Attorney General. What that does is it allows us to go to meetings, to speak freely, to work together, because there are a lot of issues where our focus is collective. Protecting kids, protecting consumers, protecting seniors, protecting our taxpayers, our constituents. So what happens in Georgia is Thurbert doesn't join, and the House issues an impeachment resolution. Now, this is important to me personally because my brother-in-law is a representative from the 3rd District Georgia House. And this was happening right before Christmas, and I had to tell him, if you sign that resolution, I will never speak to you again. Fortunately, he had the good sense to see that this was just a cheap political ploy, and he didn't do it. But nonetheless, it happens to all of us sooner or later, and I already give you my sympathy, my condolences, my empathy. It's highly likely it's going to happen to you. So, what is it you're looking at? Because the key to understanding what is coming is to know what it is you should be looking for. And it's not things that you've had to look for before. These guys have kind of covered the nuts and will cover the nuts and bolts of civility. I'm going to talk about the landmines, the IEDs, what we like to call the shit tsunami, that may be coming your way, and if you don't know what to look for, you will do the most innocent, normal, everyday, routine thing that you've done for 10, 15 years, and it's going to blow up and end up on the front page of the paper. It's going to make your boss unhappy, and Al's going to have to come console you, which is never fun. So it could be issue related, and I love political cartoons, so my presentation is littered with these. And some of these are recent, and some of them are old, because I think there's lessons to be learned from our history. This, of course, is Senator Dick Durbin, who's complaining that the Bush administration is sending hurricanes to Cuba to torture the detainees at Guantanamo, maybe the ultimate waterboarding. Or it could be political. Now, this is one of my favorites, because you look at this and you could apply this to today. This is from 1932, and right after Roosevelt and Congress was swept by the Democrats and Hoover and the Republicans were tossed out. But it's still a great cartoon that you could put out in any election year. Although sometimes you'd have to put the elephant on the other direction, but history has a way of repeating itself. Or it could be personal. Mary Jo did a great job of showing some of the folks that gets personal. And when you get into politics, especially political animals, sometimes it takes a little bit of an ego, you might have noticed, for people to run for office, to put yourself out there, as my boss put it, to walk in my birthday suit down Main Street and my finances out for everyone to see. It takes a little bit of that and a little bit of ego, and sometimes, as we know, egos clash. So those are the three things you're probably going to see the most of. It's going to be either an issue problem, it's going to be a political problem, or it's going to be a personal problem. So what do you do? And this, again, this is one of my favorites. Just because if you've ever had to do any work in D.C. at all, this is so true. Absolutely so true. So what I want to talk about, and you heard some of this from Mary Jo, is I want to talk about being aware, being professional, and being respectful, or as I like to put it, seeing the shitstorm makes it easier to get out of the way. Now, I told Al I was going to use a story and make fun of West Texas, which I understand will probably be well received here. I went to my first football game in Lubbock, Texas in like 1991. I'd never been there. Texas Tech was in the Southwest Conference. Nebraska was at that time in the Big Eight. And we're sitting in the stands and we're looking off in the distance, and it's getting darker and darker. And I turned to this very nice older Texas Tech gentleman sitting next to me, and I said, "Is it going to rain?" And he said, "Oh no. In about 15 minutes, you want to go down to the concession stand and stay there for about 15 minutes because our daily dust storm is rolling through." Now, if it were as easy to sit in the stands and see it come in from 25 miles away, you wouldn't need me to be here to highlight for you some of the pitfalls that are coming. But trust me, they will come at some point, one time, sooner or later. So really, the key is awareness. And let me tell you all right now, you're the cat. You are never the eagle. You are always the cat. Awareness is understanding what is it I'm looking at, who's involved, and I'm going to talk about these in a little more detail. What is their motivation? Why am I involved? What can I do, and what should I do? Now, maybe the most important thing is trying to figure out what you're looking at, and it's rarely what it seems. This poor cat thinks he's looking at just another large bird. Eagle is thinking, how long will it take me to carve this cat up? So what are you looking at? Is it an issue-oriented problem? Is it a personal issue? Is it political? Or is it some combination of the three? How many of you here work with agencies on their rules and regs? There's got to be a few of you. You would think in the normal course of your business, counsel from the agency may call you and say, hey, we're changing this rule or this reg, and we're thinking about doing A, B, and C. But before we put it out to notice, we want to know if you guys are going to have a problem with it in the AG's office. In our office, we have to approve all the rules and regs as part of a formal process before they become law. And so, of course, my senior counsel to Health and Human Services, one of our valued repeat customers, comes to me and sends him back an email, says, well, I don't think you should do B and C. Now, my guy worked at HHS. He's been in the office 25 plus years. He's very knowledgeable about the details, how they operate. But he doesn't tend to read the newspaper. And these were rules dealing with child welfare. And like many states, Nebraska's been entrenched in a dispute between our legislature, providers, the governor, over how best to deal with problems in our foster care system. And by telling them not to do B and C, he had inadvertently told them not to do what the legislature wanted because he'd been set up, I believe. And so what he's telling them is what the governor wants to do and not what the legislature and the providers want to do. So, of course, the next morning, the headline, front page of the local paper, is Attorney General's office tells HHS they cannot implement legislative proposal. Pretty simple little deal that he's done 100 times before. Only my boss is running for the United States Senate, and everything our office does is considered newsworthy, especially when it gores someone else's axe. Sure. So let me